Eating berries every day can make you better at your job and protect you from chronic diseases. Today, we're going to dive into 3 incredible evidence-based benefits of eating berries, from memory to cholesterol, blood pressure to blood sugar levels. Let's dive in. So the first benefit of berries is improved brain power. This is pretty well known, and there are actually interventional studies looking at human trials and the effect of berry supplementation or even fresh berries on the human brain. There was one in particular looking at older adults, and they found that fresh berries or berry-based supplements, so that's where they dehydrate them, put them into a capsule, or put them into a beverage or something like an extract, actually improved their performance in cognitive tests related to things like memory, executive functioning, processing speed, and attention compared to placebo. And this was actually summarized in a systematic review of randomized controlled trials that are published in Nature. We'll link to that right on the screen. You can see the paper, and Nature is obviously a top tier journal. So there are some really, really interesting results that are published in these big journals where we actually have quite a lot of evidence. Also, various doses have been shown to have benefits. So it can be as much as 2 cups of frozen berries per day, or even wild berry supplementation, as little as 30 mils of concentrate, providing around 400 milligrams of anthocyanins. Even freeze-dried blueberries, for example, whole freeze-dried blueberries, only 12.5 grams per day has been shown to have these benefits, and single-dose flavonoid-rich blueberry beverages of around 500 milligrams of anthocyanins again have been shown to have those benefits too. So there is a wide variety of different doses that you can get, and we're going to go into the specific types of berries in a bit, but the main ones that have been studied are blueberries, and wild blueberries in particular. And the reason why you want wild rather than cultivated is because when you're using wild blueberries, they have been stressed by their natural environment to produce more of these anthocyanins, which are essentially these plant protective chemicals. It's their own self-defense mechanism. And when we ingest them in significant amounts, we actually we have these benefits, one of which is to our brain. You might also be thinking, well, this is all good for me. Like, I would love to have a smarter brain, but what about my kids? Good news for parents that are looking to improve the brains of their kids. There are some trials looking at children, specifically 7 to 10 years old. And they found in these particular studies, supplementing with blueberries improved the children's executive function and memory performance as well. Again, compared to placebo. Zooming in on one study in particular, a bit of juicy research here. In a double-blind crossover trial, researchers gave children 2 doses of wild blueberries. One was 15 grams and one was 30 grams. And they also had a matched placebo group as well. And they measured their cognitive abilities at baseline and then up to 6 hours following the ingestion of these varying doses of blueberries. And with tests of verbal memory, word recognition, and levels of processing, the results actually showed that the blueberry intervention improved children's performance. The best performance was following the higher 30-gram dose. And so if your kids are about to go for an examination or a test and you want to give them that little memory boost, give them a dose of 30 grams of wild blueberries. It might have an effect. So these are the interventional studies. There are lots of studies looking at observational data as well. So higher consumption of berries, looking at over 2 servings per week, so not actually that much, is related to slower rates of cognitive decline. One prospective study in a cohort of women found that a higher intake of berries and total flavonoids, so this is actually not just from things like blueberries and cranberries, blackcurrants. This is from all different types of foods that contain flavonoids, that can be like vegetables, red cabbage, onions, apples. They found that they had a delayed cognitive aging effect by as much as 2.5 years. So this literally has an anti-aging effect. Again, looking at observational studies, but still, this is something that I can put my hat on and be like, you know what? This is actually very well researched, and I would recommend having at least 2 of these servings of berries or flavonoid-rich foods per week. So overall, if we're looking at both observational information, observational data, and the interventional studies, the evidence is there to boost your brains with berries and other flavonoid-rich foods. So this is something I can definitely suggest having in your weekly diet. And just imagine, in workplaces or even schools, having berries as part of their daily routine, daily lunches. This is something that potentially could have impacts on academic achievements, memory, and attention as well. The chemicals that stand out to researchers for these brain benefits in particular are those flavonoids with particular reference to anthocyanins. So anthocyanins are a strong antioxidant flavonoid, and they also give the reddish orange, blue, purple tinge to fruits and vegetables. Around 400 anthocyanins have actually been distinguished, most of which are concentrated in the external layer of the fruits, but you also find it in the body of the fruit of things like strawberries, blueberries, cherries, all those anthocyanin-rich foods as well. Plus, you have loads of other flavonoids, phenolic acids, you've got vitamin C, fiber. So we can't completely separate the potential effects of all the other elements that you find within those particular types of ingredients from the effects that we see observationally and in those intervention studies. But it is, something that most researchers feel can be explained by the anthocyanin content. Whenever I think about berries, I think of this image right here, the anthocyanins, the phenolic acids, those dietary fibers, vitamin C. Whenever I'm looking at a bowl of strawberries or some blackberries or blueberries, I'm just thinking of those different chemicals. And if you look wider at the anthocyanin-rich foods that we find across the spectrum of both berries and vegetables, you'll find lots of really, really high amounts. And the highest are actually in things like elderberry and purple corn, chokeberry, something I haven't actually come across before. Anything above 400 milligrams of anthocyanins per 100 grams is something that you want to be thinking about getting into your diet, because anything above 400 milligrams appears to be that threshold by where we see those benefits to brain health. And I didn't see black currants on this particular study, so I went to Pheno Explorer. And if you go to Pheno Explorer here, you'll see black currants that are particularly wild and abundant in the UK have over 500 milligrams of different types of anthocyanins per 100 grams as well. So black currants, really cheap, really accessible. You can get them frozen. I'll definitely go for something like that. Put it into smoothies, put them onto porridge. It's a really, really easy way of getting some anthocyanins into your diet. Benefit number 2, cardioprotective effects. Berries and anthocyanin-rich foods are fantastic for your heart health. Again, looking at interventional studies. So there was a systematic review with a meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials, of human trials, looking at adding berries to people's diets, and they found it lowered blood pressure, it lowered total levels of cholesterol, it lowered triglycerides, as well as markers of chronic low-grade inflammation, which suggests a beneficial effect on cardiovascular risk factors. This is phenomenal. So again, as part of a strategy to improve your heart health, I would 100% add berries to your diet. Looking at observational data, so over time, habitual intake of anthocyanin-rich foods, particularly berries, is linked to a 27% lower risk of total cardiovascular diseases and a 9% lower risk of cardiovascular disease-related deaths as well. So again, the caveat here is that it's observational. You can't infer causation from that. There's loads of other issues with observational data like healthy user bias, but still looking at interventions and observational data, there is a clear case for getting berries in your diet to improve your heart health. Get berries for your heart. It's super, super easy, and it's very, very accessible as well. Benefit number 3, keeping your blood sugar in check and reducing your risk of type 2 diabetes. Again, looking at interventional studies. This is great looking at berries because there are tons of interventional studies out there. Adding blueberry and cranberry to people's diets significantly reduced fasting blood glucose and glycated hemoglobin levels. That's a marker that we look at to determine the glucose effect, or how much sugar there is in someone's bloodstream over the previous 90 days or so. And looking at that compared to placebo, found that berries significantly reduced those markers. This was summarized in a meta-analysis, a randomized controlled trial, was published in 2022. I'll put the links right there. The caveat to this is that these results were only significant in diabetic individuals. So people who had type 2 diabetes found these effects. In non-diabetics, none of those results were significant as well. So this is just something to bear in mind, that this is purely looking at type 2 diabetics. Can we find any observational data or any data at all that shows that eating berries reduces the risk of type 2 diabetes? Yes, we can. The observational data paints an incredible picture. Over time, a higher intake of berries and dietary anthocyanins was associated with an 18% reduced risk of type 2 diabetes, summarized in this clinical paper that we will link there as well. So look, we've got evidence for benefits for your brain, heart, metabolic health. Why is this happening with berries? Let's take a peek under the hood and see exactly why these berries work their magic. Well, when you eat berries, you chew them and your digestion releases lots of different active compounds, especially those anthocyanins that get further broken down into other metabolites and have various targets in the body. Lab studies suggest that these compounds in the berries could impact our brain, our mitochondria, our gut microbes, and many, many more. If you take a look at this diagram that I've got up here, you'll see the various effects that berries can have. So let's look at the first one, improving antioxidant defenses. It reduces oxidative stress, which is related to many chronic diseases, including pathological alterations in the brain as well. Berries are a rich source of polyphenols, which are among the most plentiful antioxidants in the human diet. And in animal studies, berry anthocyanins were found to decrease free radical generation and improve antioxidant defenses in the brain as well. On the subject of inflammation, the second thing is that it reduces chronic low-grade inflammation. Flavonoids work as anti-inflammatory agents that can reduce the negative symptoms of inflammation. Again, looking at lab studies, these anthocyanin extracts from berries reduce the expression of inflammatory chemicals by regulating the transcription of things like NF-kappa B and also reducing interleukins as well. IL-6 is the one that we tend to look for in lab studies. And this is also related to the development of cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes as well, and the knock-on effects of these conditions. So this is why it has potentially an anti-inflammatory effect. Just a quick one. If you're enjoying this content, you will love my mini series on inflammation. I go through the different types of foods that you should be having, what inflammation actually is, plus lifestyle practices to reduce inflammation. You can get it for free right now in the link in the caption below. Back to the podcast. The third thing on the subject of inflammation, brain inflammation in particular, so looking at animal models, blueberry supplementation decreases the activation of immune cells in the brain, so these microglia. These suggest that they could decrease neuroinflammation, slowing the progression of brain aging and of neurodegenerative diseases with an inflammatory component. This isn't necessarily borne out in interventional studies in humans, but there is a mechanistic link there that needs to be further explained. This may explain some of the observations that we see with the anti-aging effect for people who habitually take berries in their diet. Again, another reason, some more weight of evidence behind why I'm a big fan of getting berries in for your brain as well. The other thing is that it promotes neurogenesis. This is the formation of new neurons. Again, according to animal studies, supplementation with blueberries improves neuroplasticity. And this is indicated by the increased numbers of specific cells that are markers of neurogenesis, and BDNF in the hippocampus of mice in this particular animal study. BDNF is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's kind of like grow more for your brain. It just increases those synaptic connections. And again, another reason why berries might have that anti-aging effect, particularly on our brain as well. There is also the suggestion that it regulates the activity of enzymes in the digestive tract that break down carbohydrates into glucose. So it has that glucose stabilizing effect, which might again explain why in diabetics, when people have berries, it improves their regulation of sugar in the bloodstream, and also why people who don't have type 2 diabetes yet have reduced risk of type 2 diabetes if they consume berries more regularly as well. So hopefully I've convinced you that you should be having berries in your diet every day. How much? Well, there is a wide range of doses that we've looked at looking at those studies. It ranges from 1 to 2 servings per week to 200 grams of fresh berries every single day. There was one meta-analysis that found that the reductions in low-density lipoprotein cholesterol were only statistically significant in subjects consuming over 200 milligrams per day of anthocyanins. That sounds like a lot, but that's only about 50 grams of blueberries every single day. Whereas there are some other effects on HDL-C, for example, and triglycerides. Those were seen with lower amounts of anthocyanins per day as well. So less than 200 milligrams. That's less than 25 grams of berries per day. Lots of different studies have different doses where they showed positive effects. So my takeaway from everything of this mixed bag is that if you're aiming for a minimum of 2 portions per week, so that's 80 grams, that's like a big handful of berries twice a week, that's probably enough to see some benefits. 1 portion per day of whole berries, I think, is the ideal amount. So that's a good handful every single day. So which type of berries are best? Well, if you look at this diagram here, you'll see the variety of different polyphenols, the different types of anthocyanins that you find in different types of berries. So, for example, the main anthocyanins that you find in sweet cherry are cyanidins. In blueberries, it is delphinidins. In strawberries, it is pelargonidin. These are lots of chemicals that I struggle to pronounce. Diversity is key because all these different types of chemicals are likely to have varied impacts on your body. So you want to try and get as many different types of these berries into your diet as possible. I try and go for seasonal. I would definitely experiment with getting the extracts as well, as long as they're from a reputable source. And remember, freeze drying your berries is best to maintain the quality of the berry, and it makes it a lot more shelf stable. But fresh, if you're in season, you can get fresh berries. That's much better. This brings up the question of frozen. So since a lot of berries for a lot of people are out of season or it's quite hard to get, can you get the same benefits from frozen? The answer is absolutely yes. They sometimes have as much of these polyphenols in frozen berries as they do in fresh berries. So there's research analyzing the polyphenol content of blueberries frozen for 1, 3, and 5 months, and they found no difference over fresh berries. There was no degradation of these polyphenols, and the bioavailability of them was actually in some ways increased because of the ice crystals that form during the freezing process. It disrupts the structure of the plant tissue and preserves it even more so, and makes it a lot more accessible to you. So look, there's lots of different ways in which you can get berries. Try and opt for at least 2 portions every single week. Try and get berries every day if you can, and go for diversity. Those are my top tips, and it's for your brain, your heart, and sugar control. Go and get some berries in your life. If you liked that episode, you will love the full library of Doctor's Kitchen podcast episodes, including this one I did with Dr. Robert Lustig, where we talk about sugar in all of its harmful forms and what you can do about it right now. You can check it out by clicking out on the link.